Is your salt really just salt? Think again. The salt sitting on your kitchen table may be far more processed than you realize. I examined some of America's most popular salt brands to uncover what's actually inside, how they're made, and which ones rely more on marketing than quality. We're counting down the 7 salt brands to avoid and revealing 3 brands that are actually worth buying before your next grocery trip. Number 7, Morton iodized salt. Most Americans grew up with this familiar blue container sitting on the dinner table. For generations, Morton iodized salt has been presented as the default choice, the salt people trust without a second thought. And to be fair, it does provide iodine, an important nutrient that helps support thyroid health. That is a legitimate benefit. But this is where the story becomes more interesting. When you look beyond the iconic packaging, Morton is no longer simply salt. It is a highly refined product made primarily of sodium chloride, with added iodine and anti-caking agents designed to keep the grains flowing freely even after months in a humid pantry. The refining process strips away naturally occurring trace minerals found in less processed salts. Now, none of this means the product is unsafe. It remains fully legal and widely consumed. The issue is value. Most people believe they are buying a natural ingredient when they are actually buying a heavily processed seasoning engineered for shelf stability and uniformity. The irony is that the familiar umbrella girl on the package communicates simplicity and tradition, while the product itself represents one of the most industrialized forms of salt available. If you bought Morton because it seemed like the obvious, trustworthy choice, you are not making a careless decision. You are responding to decades of marketing and habit. But as this countdown continues, you'll see that not all salts are created equal, and some brands offer a far closer connection to what real salt originally was. Number 6, Great Value Iodized Salt. This is the salt millions of shoppers grab without even thinking about it. It sits on the lowest shelf, carries the lowest price tag, and promises exactly what most families want: simple salt at a bargain price. And that is precisely why it deserves a closer look. When manufacturers compete primarily on price, every fraction of a cent matters. Salt itself is inexpensive, so the business model becomes about producing a uniform, shelf-stable product at enormous scale. Like most conventional table salts, Great Value Iodized Salt is heavily refined until nearly everything except sodium chloride is removed. Then iodine is added back in, along with anti-caking agents to prevent clumping during storage. The result is a product designed for consistency, not character. Much like other table salts, the focus is on free-flowing crystals, long shelf life, and manufacturing efficiency rather than preserving naturally occurring mineral content. Now, to be clear, none of this means the product violates regulations. It operates completely within FDA guidelines. The real question is whether consumers realize what they are actually buying. The packaging suggests a basic kitchen staple. What you are really purchasing is one of the most industrially standardized ingredients in the grocery store. You are not choosing it because you want a highly processed salt. You are choosing it because it appears to be the obvious option when trying to save money. And that is the recurring theme you'll notice throughout this countdown. The biggest compromises are often hidden inside products that look the most ordinary, because the next brand takes that same industrial model and wraps it in a much more premium image. Number 5, Himalayan Chef Pink Himalayan Salt. Pink salt has become one of the biggest success stories in modern food marketing. Walk through almost any grocery store, and you'll see it positioned as a healthier, more natural alternative to ordinary table salt. Himalayan Chef has built much of its reputation around that image, with eye-catching pink crystals, mountain imagery, and packaging that suggests untouched purity. There is some truth behind the marketing. Unlike highly refined table salt, Himalayan pink salt naturally contains trace minerals that give it its distinctive color. But this is where expectations often drift far beyond the evidence. Those trace minerals exist in extremely small amounts, far too little to provide meaningful nutritional benefits in the quantities people typically consume. In fact, reputable health organizations continue to recommend limiting total sodium intake regardless of whether it comes from table salt, sea salt, or Himalayan salt. The pink color may look healthier, but it does not transform salt into a health food. Another overlooked issue is consistency. Naturally mined salts can vary in mineral composition from batch to batch, and independent testing over the years has shown that some Himalayan salt products from various manufacturers have contained detectable levels of naturally occurring heavy metals. These levels are generally within regulatory limits, but they highlight why natural does not automatically mean pure. Himalayan Chef is not on this list because it is unsafe or illegal. It is here because its premium image often encourages shoppers to pay significantly more for benefits that science has not clearly demonstrated. You're paying for the story as much as the salt, and that's an important distinction as we move closer to the brands that make even bigger promises. Number 4, Boline Sea Salt. At first glance, Boline sea salt looks like the kind of product you'd expect to find in the kitchen of a professional chef. The classic French branding, coastal imagery, and references to traditional sea salt harvesting create an impression of authenticity that immediately separates it from ordinary table salt. And to its credit, Boline is harvested from evaporated seawater rather than being heavily refined like conventional table salt. That gives it a different texture and preserves small amounts of naturally occurring minerals. But here's what many shoppers never hear. Sea salt has gained a reputation as being automatically cleaner simply because it comes from the ocean. In reality, today's oceans are exposed to pollution from plastics, industrial runoff, and other environmental contaminants. Scientists have detected microplastics in sea salt products from multiple countries around the world. While researchers are still studying what these levels mean for long-term human health, the discovery challenges the popular belief that all sea salt is naturally pristine. This doesn't mean Boline is breaking any laws or selling an unsafe product. Regulatory agencies permit its sale, and the company follows established food safety standards. The concern is the marketing narrative. The packaging encourages consumers to associate sea salt with untouched nature when the oceans themselves are no longer untouched. If you purchased Boline because it felt closer to nature, that's an understandable decision. But nature today is more complicated than the label suggests. And the next brands on this list take that gap between image and reality even further, relying on premium packaging to justify products that aren't necessarily better than the inexpensive alternatives beside them. Number 3, Celtic Sea Salt, Selena Naturally. Few salt brands have developed a stronger health halo than Celtic Sea Salt. The soft gray crystals, minimalist packaging, and claims of traditional harvesting have helped turn it into a favorite among wellness influencers, natural food stores, and shoppers looking for a less processed alternative. To be fair, Celtic sea salt is less refined than ordinary table salt. It retains moisture and naturally occurring trace minerals that are removed during the refining process used for conventional table salt. That gives it a distinctive texture and flavor that many home cooks genuinely appreciate. The problem begins when marketing turns those differences into health claims. Across social media, Celtic sea salt is frequently promoted as being dramatically healthier, more hydrating, or capable of replacing electrolytes. Those claims are not supported by strong clinical evidence. While the salt does contain minerals such as magnesium and potassium, they are present in quantities too small to make a meaningful nutritional difference under normal use. At the end of the day, it is still predominantly sodium chloride, and excessive sodium intake remains a concern regardless of the source. Another factor many shoppers overlook is price. A package of Celtic sea salt can cost several times more than conventional salt, largely because consumers associate natural and traditional with superior health. This brand isn't on the avoid list because it's unsafe or because it violates food regulations. It's here because the premium image often leads people to expect benefits that simply aren't backed by current scientific evidence. And the top 2 brands illustrate an even bigger gap between marketing promises and measurable reality. Number 2, Redmond Real Salt. The name is almost impossible to ignore. Real salt. It immediately plants a question in your mind. If this is the real salt, what does that make every other brand on the shelf? That branding has helped Redmond become one of the fastest growing premium salt brands in the United States. Mined from an ancient underground deposit in Utah, it is marketed as an unrefined salt, that naturally contains dozens of trace minerals and is free from many of the processing steps used for conventional table salt. Those are legitimate characteristics, but they are often interpreted far beyond what the science actually shows. Many online influencers claim Redmond Real Salt boosts hydration, dramatically improves electrolyte balance, detoxifies the body, or provides significant nutritional benefits because of its mineral content. The reality is that while the salt contains measurable trace minerals, they exist in amounts too small to replace a balanced diet or medically appropriate electrolyte sources. From a nutritional standpoint, sodium remains the dominant component, and excessive intake still carries the same concerns associated with any other salt. Another point rarely discussed is that unrefined does not automatically mean superior. Natural mineral variation is expected in mined salts, and no salt, regardless of its source, should be viewed as a health supplement simply because it contains trace elements. Redmond Real Salt is not on this list because it is unsafe. In fact, many cooks appreciate its flavor and texture. It ranks this high because the marketing often creates the impression that paying a premium buys a fundamentally healthier product when the evidence shows it is still, first and foremost, salt. And the number one brand takes that promise of purity even further, building an entire identity around wellness while asking consumers to pay some of the highest prices in the category. Number 1, Maldon Sea Salt. This is the brand that surprises the most people. Maldon Sea Salt is often treated as the gold standard. You'll find it in upscale grocery stores, restaurant kitchens, and countless cooking shows. Its signature pyramid-shaped flakes, elegant packaging, and centuries-old heritage create the impression that you're buying one of the purest salts money can buy. And in terms of culinary performance, Maldon genuinely deserves praise. Its delicate flakes dissolve beautifully, provide a clean burst of saltiness, and are a favorite finishing salt among professional chefs. So why does it top this countdown? Because the biggest issue isn't the product itself, it's the story surrounding it. Many shoppers have come to believe that premium sea salt is inherently healthier than ordinary salt. Scientific evidence simply doesn't support that conclusion. Whether sodium comes from table salt, sea salt, Himalayan salt, or gourmet flake salt, the body processes the overwhelming majority of it in the same way. The small amounts of naturally occurring minerals in sea salt are far too low to provide meaningful health benefits through normal consumption. Like all sea salts, Maldon is also sourced from seawater. Modern oceans contain environmental contaminants, including microplastics that researchers have detected in sea salt products from many regions around the world. While the health implications are still being studied, and these findings do not mean Maldon is unsafe or out of compliance with food regulations, they challenge the widespread belief that sea salt automatically means untouched purity. That is what places Maldon at number 1. Not because it's an illegal or dangerous product, but because it represents the widest gap between perception and reality. People aren't paying only for exceptional texture and craftsmanship. They're often paying for the belief that premium automatically means healthier. And that's the most important lesson from this entire investigation. Legal does not always mean ideal. Premium does not always mean healthier. And the front of the package rarely tells the complete story. The good news is that there are still a few brands that focus on transparency and quality without relying on exaggerated health claims. Those are the brands we'll look at next. Real Salt brand number 3, Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt. After looking at brands that rely heavily on marketing stories, it's refreshing to find one that earns its reputation for a much simpler reason: consistency. Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt has been a favorite of professional chefs for decades, not because it's marketed as a superfood, but because it performs exactly the way real salt should. The ingredient list is remarkably short. In most versions, it's simply salt with no added iodine and typically no unnecessary additives or flavor enhancers. The large, light flakes dissolve evenly, making it much easier to season food accurately than dense table salt. What also sets Diamond Crystal apart is what it doesn't promise. The company doesn't claim its salt will detox your body, boost hydration, or provide miraculous health benefits. It doesn't rely on exotic mountain stories or wellness buzzwords to justify its place on the shelf. Instead, it focuses on quality, purity, and reliable performance in the kitchen. That doesn't mean you can use unlimited amounts. Like every other salt, Diamond Crystal is still primarily sodium chloride, and moderation remains important for overall health. But unlike many premium brands, you're paying for craftsmanship and usability rather than exaggerated nutritional claims. If your goal is simply to buy a dependable, minimally processed salt that chefs genuinely trust, Diamond Crystal is one of the strongest options available. It reminds us that real quality isn't about flashy packaging or miracle marketing. Sometimes it's about doing one simple thing exceptionally well and letting the product speak for itself. Real Salt brand number 2, Redmond Real Salt. After exposing brands that rely on image more than substance, it's only fair to recognize one that has earned a loyal following for reasons that go beyond clever marketing. Redmond Real Salt comes from an ancient underground salt deposit in Utah, protected from modern ocean pollution. Because it is mined rather than harvested from seawater, many consumers choose it specifically to avoid concerns about marine contaminants. The company also keeps the salt relatively unrefined, allowing it to retain its natural color and naturally occurring trace minerals instead of stripping everything down to pure sodium chloride. What makes Redmond stand out is its transparency. The company openly explains where its salt comes from and publishes information about its testing and sourcing practices. Rather than hiding behind vague phrases like all natural, it gives customers a clearer picture of how the product is produced. That said, it's important to keep expectations realistic. Redmond Real Salt is not a miracle health product. Its trace minerals are present in small amounts and they do not transform salt into a nutritional supplement. Excess sodium is still excess sodium, regardless of the source. So, why does it rank this high? Because you're paying for a minimally processed product with a transparent origin, not for artificial flavors, anti-caking chemicals, or an illusion created by flashy packaging. The price is higher than ordinary table salt, but that premium reflects a simpler production process and a company that places a greater emphasis on sourcing and openness. And the number one recommendation takes that commitment to purity and simplicity one step further. Real Salt brand number 1, Jacobson Sea Salt. When you strip away the marketing, ignore the colorful packaging, and focus on what actually matters, one brand consistently rises to the top, Jacobson Sea Salt. Unlike many companies that depend on wellness buzzwords or exaggerated health claims, Jacobson keeps its message remarkably simple. The salt is harvested from the cold waters of the Oregon coast using a traditional evaporation process designed to preserve its clean flavor and delicate texture. The ingredient list is exactly what you hope to see: sea salt. Nothing more. What truly separates Jacobson from many competitors is its commitment to transparency. The company openly explains how its salt is harvested, where it comes from, and how it is processed. It doesn't promise miracle health benefits or suggest that eating more salt will improve your life. Instead, it focuses on craftsmanship, quality, and producing a finishing salt that lets real food shine. Of course, even the highest quality salt should be consumed in moderation. Jacobson Sea Salt is still primarily sodium chloride, and no premium brand changes the well-established recommendations to limit excessive sodium intake. The difference is that you're paying for careful sourcing, traditional production methods, and exceptional culinary quality, rather than clever marketing or unnecessary additives. If there is one lesson from this entire countdown, it's this: the best salt isn't the one making the biggest health promises. It's the one that has the fewest unnecessary changes between nature and your kitchen. A simple ingredient list, transparent sourcing, and honest marketing will almost always tell you more than the front of the package. Real quality doesn't need exaggerated claims. It speaks for itself.